Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition for the week. I'm Devin Bedoni of Lichen Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing.
Let's rock that quote.
The key to getting faster is actually going slower because they're making it better. From Ryan Tierney from Seating Matters.
Interesting. That's the old slow as
smooth and smooth as fast.
Yeah.
I think it's that. I think it's also the reason I stuck it in is because I feel like the last month every podcast is sort of about like how much time should you dedicate to improvements?
Yeah.
/ how much, like, where are you finding time between producing stuff that customers are paying for?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just helpful to get a reminder from time to time that, like, I don't know, not making improvements, you're almost like taking out a loan from your, it's like a debt. I don't know. It's like,
right. Yeah.
On the flip side, if you try to go to single piece flow immediately, you're going to go bankrupt. And if you try to spend too much time on improvements and too little time actually making stuff, you're also going to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
So I don't really know where that line is, but it is, it's really helpful. I think in the past week has been kind of pretty full on,
right,
for me and the team. And yeah, I mean, it was sort of striking to me that like lean is a big part of it is kind of a long time horizon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like compounding only works if you have time on your side.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like if your deadline is like our deadline, we need to ship everything in, we have 12 working days, right? Before stuff just won't arrive in time for the holidays.
Oh, right.
And then people are going to be pissed about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, do we hold off on improving but I think more than that, and you kind of alluded to this, is like more about building a culture than it is about what your people are doing like it is about what they're doing, but the way to make it happen is through a cultural shift. And that culture doesn't really just go on hold, maybe. If you're viewing things a particular way, I don't know.
I'm very curious about that part specifically. You know, we kind of touched on the example of like the people on the line not necessarily being the ones who do actual improvement efforts. And I'm very much curious how to balance that aspect still. And I think personally, a lot of the stuff I've been dealing with has been sort of these, and we've talked about this a lot at this point, but sort of these big kind of rollouts of sort of whole new systems.
Right.
And it can feel very, which maybe now that I'm saying this out loud, it might be we might be having a faulty approach in my shop, my business, but it can feel often like you're sort of in this like amorphous limbo zone for a while, and like you're not improving even though you are in the process of kind of rolling it out. And I think it's hard to take the time to break things down into digestible pieces. It feels like sometimes it's like it's a whole other process just to do that breakdown. Where was I going with this? Anyway, I do think that I'm curious how bigger companies handle this and how they handle it during times of extreme load like you're dealing with right now.
Right.
Because I have to believe that not everyone just like stays the course no matter what and isn't responding to, the situation.
Yeah, I think there's that. I think like I've had, it's been a huge success, but the reason it's been stressful is due to failures, I would say, to some degree.
What's been the product launch?
Like I didn't anticipate a lot of the problems we're having in production. Like they're solvable problems, we're solving them. I think, there is an example of the benefit of, so I have two things for today that I thought I'd mention. One is kind of seeing a real world example of why quality control is so essential in driving down inventory. And actually two examples of that. And then the other is like when you get busy, it's always hard. Like there's always that mental calculus of like, I need to do a project really quick. do I take the time to clean up the shop before starting, or you know what I mean? Or like, do you make space on your work table, or do you just make a few cuts on the floor? That kind of thing.
Right.
And like, is it faster to do it sort of slow down to go fast, or is it faster to just like push through and go fast?
Yeah, I think it comes back to your time horizon again.
For sure.
Right.
And so for me, I was sort of like, okay, let's just push. And then it became very clear that we had a massive bottleneck in paint because I didn't anticipate the fact that these parts are much bigger. And then the way I chose to rack them is much, much bigger. And so we were only fitting like 20 complete buckles in the oven at one time. The other buckles, I get 120 in there.
Oh, that's a big difference.
Yeah, and then it bakes for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that was really not tenable. So I designed a thing and made it, and it works very well. And that holds 20 pieces, and we can fit 4 of them in the oven. So that gets us up to 40 buckles instead of and the 20 buckles were like really jammed in there, and so I kept scrapping parts because I'd like touch them to other parts as I'm loading the oven, which was really demoralizing and also not good for creating inventory
or the bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so slowing down to make those racks felt like I sort of penciled it out, and it, in a very short time horizon, is absolutely useful. That said, the way I'm doing it, the way I'm making time, is working till like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So it's like we do our production day, and then I just stay in the shop till very late doing other projects. And so I don't know how that all factors in.
Sure.
That's taking a debt from a different part of my life.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. You've just outsourced the debt.
Yeah.
To some
Put
other.
it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the part that definitely has me curious. Because I'm sort of over that in my life.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
No, totally.
Sometimes I have the question, I'm like, well, if I would just work a little more, I might be a little less stressed because there wouldn't be so many hanging things. But also then my life would suck. So it's kind of like one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this seems to be a long-standing question, recurring theme, and I still am slightly convinced that it is somewhat a matter of scale or visibility. Like, I do think there's, in a theoretical world, if people had enough visibility into the priorities in the business and what everyone was meant to be doing all the time, there is a lot of blank time. It's just hard to make switches. Especially, like, it's hard enough for myself as someone who has a pretty, like, my job kind of these days is to have a big picture look. It's hard enough for me to, like, switch and be like, okay, I've got 15 minutes. What am I going to do?
Right.
I think it's even harder for the other people in the business who are kind of like, okay, this and this thing are kind of my responsibility.
Yeah.
There's 10 minutes here. What's it going to look like if I just start doing this other random task?
I think the counter argument to the scale question is there's a lot of companies in the U.S. Not a lot, but like a number of companies that spend the first hour of an 8-hour day on production. And no matter the size of your organization, on improvements. Yeah. So no matter the size of your organization, that's everyone working for 1/8 of the time on improvements and like 3S'ing and stuff. I don't really know.
I think that's a reasonable approach. Because I think the visibility question is that's a big nut to crack. Yeah. To try and just like absorb improvements into the random spare minutes that arrive. Right. Because they do. Yeah. So I think just saying we're going to dedicate this much time is much more like realistic and like actionable.
Right. The other starts to feel just like crazy making.
Yeah.
Where it's
then I guess the question is, do you pause that when things are crazy or not?
Yeah.
Or does it just work so well that things don't get crazy?
That's a good question. I think like, I don't know. There's a term, Jidoka, that's like stop and fix. So like you know, there's the anecdote in the Toyota Way about like the number of andon pulls went down in a plant.
Yep.
And they were like, okay, what do we need to do to get the andon pulls back up?
Mm-hmm.
Like this idea about being like excited about having issues.
Right.
And I don't know, you know, problems are gems and all that. Anyway, it's a puzzle.
Yeah, I guess what am I trying to figure out here, or kind of expose? I think we talked about it a little bit before, but I think the process stability question comes into play too, not just size, not just business size, but stability.
Well, I don't know if it's, to me, it has something to do with, I think stability might be a symptom, and the underlying cause might more be like, it's not exactly product market fit, but it's sort of like, how certain are you that you're doing a thing a good way?
Mm-hmm.
And that does have something to do with like stability and how long you've been doing it and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not necessarily a good way, but like how reliably
Right.
how reliably do we fulfill orders and how, like, there's a lot of discussion in Toyota Kata about like actually measuring your stability of a process, of being like, okay, so theoretically we make 60 of these an hour. Are we actually making one per minute? Or are we making one in 4 minutes and then 4 the next minute and then, you know, randomly?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, a lot of our processes, speaking for myself and probably for you to some extent, are much more in the like 1 in 4 minutes, 4 in 1 minutes kind of thing.
Totally.
And I think it's much, when you've kind of achieved more of that, and I'm speaking broadly here, sort of conceptually, more of the like 1 every minute,
Right.
like we meet demand in a stable manner, that I think it becomes, you're at a point there where it's easier to be taking, you know, for the sake of running with this thought experiment, 10 seconds of every minute to do an alternate thing and be like, okay, everybody, 10 seconds of every minute, you go do the thing. Or if it's in the case of a day, first hour of every day, you go do the thing, then you do your stable process for the rest of the day, versus it being like, okay, this week is completely different than last week.
That's a good point.
And this week, it's all hands on deck for this one thing. And we're going to be communicating constantly because you're going to be doing something different than you're used to. And I'm going to be doing something different. I think they're very different scenarios until you get to a point where maybe like you're used to all hands on decking, but that's like your standard process, and you systems around it.
Right. Like there is no improvement without standard work sort of comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to standardize. It's hard to write an SOP for every week looks completely different. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a good point. Maybe it is standard work. I was sort of thinking about taking another crack at like getting back on the horse of creating SOPs, because we sort of fell off of it. We have some at some stations. None of them are photos, and the text is like, it's not very useful in that I never read it as someone who does the work, but I think I would reference photos to remind myself.
Is it just too long, or
it's long? It's hard to balance how specific it should be. And then also like a lot of the stuff I'm describing is like a sentence or two to make it clear.
Yeah.
But that takes, I don't know how long. I'm not a super fast reader, but either way, it's way quicker to just glance at a photo and be like, oh yeah, I take that lever and push it this way or whatever. Right.
Yeah. Not to take anything away from that, because I think there's a lot of validity to switching from text to photos.
Yeah.
But I've often found that the more critical piece is not like how the information it's delivered. It's like what your touch point is to have to interact with it. And I've been finding this, like, I don't set up machines a lot these days, but when I do, because I'm unfamiliar, there's this touch point of the, like, before you put the green thingy on, check this list. And I found it to be very helpful in having that specific, like, here's the point at which you confirm, to be kind of critical.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if it's more about that than it is about the the format.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways of fixing the problem. One is sort of enforcement of making sure you're checking in with a thing, but I don't know if that's like a checklist or an SOP. And the other one is sort of like whether it's a tool that's available to you.
Right.
So like part of the thing is sort of like making sure that there's cross training, making sure that other people know how to do critical functions of the business, which we don't have currently in a lot of places. So that's a real limitation. Like right now, some people have offered to come like help me in the shop, and it's kind of like, that's not going to be helpful. You know, I wish it was, and it would be if there were good SOPs, because a lot, like our assembly station at this point, like we've done a lot of work on our fixturing. The sewing used to be a highly skilled kind of thing. Like it took 2 weeks to train someone to get really good, consistent results. Now, like anyone can do it with like 5 minutes of training, but there's no visual. So there's no like,
and it's not consistent work.
It's very consistent, but if I trained someone, I know that they'd be like, oh, hey, sorry, can you show me that one more time? Or like, it's doing this weird thing. What is that?
But is it consistent? Like you can just like put somebody on that? I guess that's the thing I've come into is like,
I can't put someone on it every day for the rest of the year, but I could certainly put someone on it for like 5 hours a day for the next 12 days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that right there is that's the answer though, right? I've always found that with hiring or bringing someone on is like, well, you can do this part of the week. Does that happen to be the part of the week that you're available?
No, totally. But I think SOPs would be really helpful.
Yeah, sorry. Off topic there, but
no, that's another question.
Right. But I think it comes back to the like standardized work and standardized a stable process, stable schedule. I think of that is very fundamental. It is fundamental to everything.
That's a good point, and I think actually it becomes more and more challenging. Not hearing you say that, I'm sort of thinking back on like I feel like the past 4 weeks, 6 weeks I've found it more and more challenging to stick to sort of a consistent like improvement approach. Like we come in, we do improvements, then and like some of that is us getting busier, and so I don't like that's not an excuse. Like I think, but it is it is part of it.
Sure.
The other part is introducing a lot more variables into production. So launching a new product has really destabilized. A lot of things that used to be extremely procedural are not. It's sort of like, okay, well, we can run this part, but we need to watch it and we need to check quite a bit, and we probably are going to need to update the tool paths a bit and on and on. So that is really disruptive to just like everyone's doing their job and suddenly
tell me about it.
Yeah. It's pretty brutal. Anyway, maybe I can describe a couple reasons why, or a couple specific examples of why quality control is so essential to driving down inventory. So I have two. One is we had an issue a while ago where we have a Kanban quantity of springs, and then when that gets triggered, we order new springs. And we had a situation where they came in and like 60% of them were rejects.
Yeah.
We hadn't QC'd them on the way in.
Yeah.
So that's like a pretty common one, but that is a very specific example of why quality is so critical when you're driving down product. Is like if it's just in time, you
driving
need to
down
know,
inventory.
Driving down, sorry, yeah. When you reach for it, it needs to be ready to go.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, well, nope, send it back. And so I was at the paint booth. This is the second example. I was painting parts. As I mentioned, like the oven's been an issue, so I scrapped a part. And I've been painting them in pairs. So like one belt body and one belt slide. And I alternate. And then, so I scrapped a body. And so I was sort of like, oh, well, should I bother painting the corresponding slide? Because we can't ship just a body. And then I was like, well, if I paint it, and we have a reject of a slide, then that will be nice to have a spare. And then I was like, right, so this is why quality control is so emphasized in like, not, in-station quality and everything else, because that is driving up inventory because of uncertainty in outcomes and uncertainty in the how many parts are going to be actually shippable.
Yeah.
And you can just see like how that would extrapolate out. The less certainty you have about your inventory, the more of it you kind of need.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if we were running a week on one part and putting that directly into a warehouse and doing like, I don't know, 10% quality control, you're still not certain that when you pull it out, it's going to be good. So you kind of want to pull it out early. You probably want to have extra backup just in case.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I just thought that was interesting. I think it's always, it's interesting to me, and I hope like a useful, like part of the point of this podcast, I think, is like see where the rubber meets the road with these concepts, and then like how does it play out?
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Those are all very real and good examples.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm reading through our list here.
Yeah. So that's what I have for this week.
Yeah. On the same topic, sort of continuation of our topic.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't an exact quote, but it was pulled from Toyota Kata. The author was discussing like integrating lean into a company that had not run lean previously.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the context was in their coaching kata, how to teach people to do the A3 coaching or the improvement kata process. And they were basically like, to expect this to work throughout an entire organization instantly is crazy.
Yeah.
Like you start with a few people and then you start on one process, and once that process is very stable, then you have those people kind of spread. And so what I wrote here was, to think that small companies like us can realistically be improving everything all the time is a little ludicrous once you view it.
It really is
in that context.
And I think maybe that's what I've been feeling is like, I think like a big focus for me has been on awareness and like reading these books and then going in the shop and being like, oh, that's why overproduction is such a problem, and that's why everything needs to be improving all the time, essentially, because then you just start seeing waste everywhere.
Yeah.
And then it can kind of feel like a new way of running around with your hair on fire. Is on the improvements.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me feel like my brain's going to explode a bit.
I know. So how do we fix that? I have the same feeling. It's like everything needs to be like 10 times better, and all of it is interesting and exciting. But then cumulatively, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, standing question, ongoing.
Standing question, but then we have terms like Jidoka, which you're like, really? Everything I should just stop? And I'm sure the answer is no, right? You don't stop everything to make improvements all the time.
Right.
But you do.
Right.
I don't know. Anyway.
Well, that was the classic thing with the and-on chords, right?
Yeah.
Is like when the concept was first introduced, Westerners were like, what? You stop the line every time someone pulls this chord? The reality is, no, you don't.
Right.
A lot of times someone runs over and helps you, and you don't necessarily fix the problem.
In the moment.
It
then does get fixed.
Eventually, a bunch of people, like a bunch of polls today have been like, also I'm surmising here, I've never been in one of these factories, so, but this is just kind of
maybe we need to go.
That would be cool. Yeah, they're like, okay, we're having a regular issue with this one thing. We need to improve it. But I think it's good to remember too that there is still a lot of just like, hey, I need help getting this bolt on before this car moves on to the next station. Can you help me? Like, run over and help me do this.
Okay, so here's in my shop today. We're running our automation. It is unbelievable and amazing, and everyone should pursue automation. But we now run 80 parts at a time of this one part. It runs for 4 hours or something. Oh, also as an aside, I figured out how to do overnight runs. is if I just stay in the shop till 2 a.m. and then run a 4-hour cycle time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So problem solved.
I think technically that's called a second shift.
Yeah.
Slight distinction.
That's fair. No. So I was at the machine, and I don't know why, because I didn't have time to look at it. But in 40 parts, I heard 3 go bye-bye. Yes. They flew out of the vise.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know why. I think we're whatever the problem is. So do I walk over and stop the CNC and then dig into it and machine new soft jaws and come up with a whole new scheme? By some things you read, yes, but no is the answer, right? We're going to end the day with 37 good shippable parts. Well, shippable to the next process, let's say. The cost there is obviously real, but it's also, what's the word? Negligible as it relates to like the whole business. Like, it's not negligible on an ongoing basis, which is why we need to solve it, but it is negligible from a like, okay, I can do that and disappoint some customers where they don't get their gifts on time, or we can add that as like a, hey, we gotta figure this out and keep going. So what do we do? Like, what's the...
Well, also there's a middle ground.
Which is what?
Which is you note it, and what if it continues to happen, at some point you do dig into it instead of just it becoming the standard that you scrap
for sure
a percentage of your work.
Right. By the way, I didn't write this as a note, but I will mention it. The yellow cards we've been issuing to all of our processes, they've been...
Yellow card.
That's exactly it. It's been so useful. Like, we've been pulling out... It's introduced new problems, but... and that actually gets back to like stable process issues of like Sam goes to do a changeover and it has like 5 yellow cards and he's like, I don't know how to address some of these. Like, some of them were G-code related. Anyway, but that's been huge.
But at least you know.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have like 4 issues flagged, and it's really good because they don't get run without fixing them. Secondly, it's really good because it's way less overwhelming to make improvements when it's like, hey, there are these 3 things, instead of like, what was the issue with this part? I don't quite remember. I know there was something. Let me watch it. It's like, it's just like, it's standard work now. You pull it out, you resolve those issues, and you keep going.
Remind me how they get created. Is this just for CNC work, or is this across the board through the shop?
Right now we're just doing it on the CNC, but I think we're going to push it out further to other processes. And then the other thing I think we're going to add is a second color, which are actually just ideas for improvements. Because, especially on the CNC, like when you have stable G-code that runs well, you don't really want to go tinker with it. Like, we do frequently, but we'd really like to not. And so there's just a little bit of an inertia in making changes. But once you're making the changes and you're sending new code and you have it all pulled up, like...
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity to be like, what else did we want to do to this program? Let me, like, while I'm going to be standing here proving it out again, let me prove out a few things.
Yeah, it's like, we've pulled the transmission. Do we change the clutch? We do change the clutch.
Exactly. Let me check my notes and see. Yeah, so right now there's no real way of accumulating ideas on a station. And I'm wondering if it would be maybe it would sort of resolve that like hair on fire feeling where I know stuff is getting captured. Like, that's been the real beauty of this system for us, is that it lets us continue to operate because I know I don't need to make sure Sam doesn't run whatever part. I'm just like, okay, I put a note on it. Like, it's dealt with. So like in a similar way, if I have ideas for improvements, yes, we have a whiteboard. Yes, like we have different things.
No, I really like this now that you're saying it. Like, the whiteboard is just where, for the most part, seems to be a place where ideas go to die. Yeah,
essentially. And if it's a really good idea, you don't need to go read it off of a whiteboard to remember it. Because you're like, I got to do this.
But it's also like an added step to go write it down. And so it does seem cool that if you had just like a little like...
Right at the process.
A little suggestion box at each station.
Exactly.
An anonymous suggestion box.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
And then when it's already, because I think there's, like if we're rearranging this station already, let's see what other ideas we had. But there is a temptation to not rearrange things because you're going to create new issues or you're going to whatever. Yeah. There's always just a temptation to be like, let's keep this as is. Anyway, so that's the new thought.
Cool. So sorry, we skipped over though. Right now, how are you so it's like if you make a change to a tool, like your tool list, then what happens?
So then so that one is an annoying one. Okay. But then I would pull out, we run 14 parts. So I'd pull out 14 of these cards and I'd write the change I made on each of those cards. And then I magnet them to the soft jaw insert. So like when you go to put the soft jaws on the vise, there's a big yellow card magneted on top of them.
That says the tools in the machine might be different.
Tool 2 was changed, prove out.
Tool 2 is changed in that program, or like tool 2 or whatever the case
I want to
may
write.
Be.
Yeah. So like the last one I did yesterday, tool 2, like because we hadn't run it in a little while, tool 2 had been changed.
In the program.
In the program.
Reprogrammed it. Yeah.
In addition to that cuts a critical face on our product. So I wanted to do a pull test after one part to make sure we're still doing well. And so I just wrote that on there. Like, I don't know how I would have managed that otherwise.
Yeah.
I just wrote that I wanted to do a pull test. Obviously, Sam was like, I don't know. Like, I need help with that. Fine. Like, when it came up, we addressed it. And then I forget, there were a few more flags on there that I'm not remembering right now. Yeah, so you literally take out one of these laminated cards, write on it with a dry erase, and then magnet it on the part. And then if you have new things that come up that you want... this was the other one. Is I had a pretty scary thing come up. I mean, the potential was scary. Yeah. Where the flip station only got halfway through its flip. Oh, yeah. And then the spindle started coming back down. Luckily, I was at the machine. We've never had that. And I stopped it before they smashed into each other. And so what I did, I ordered some sensors, but then I also 3D printed the gripper fingers for the flip station. But then I wanted to change the handoff so that there was never aluminum and aluminum trying to occupy the same space through that whole like flip. And so now I needed to move the handoff position in X by a little bit on all of our parts. And so I wrote a card for all of our parts and stuck it on the jaws. So every single one we had to go change the G code. But that was just on there. It's like, here's what we need to do. And then you do it. Cool. And then you prove it out. So it's been really big. And I feel like it would be useful to also have that, like you were saying, a suggestion box. Yeah. In a different color.
Yeah, thinking through our process, that we handle this a little, not better, but differently. Okay. Just tends to be digital. Because it's much less repeat work, and it's more like, here's things that need to be attended to for this job. But hearing you say this right now, it's kind of easy to wash. We just have like a notes area for a job, like in addition to the setup. Right now, there's just like
so it'd be easy to ignore it.
It could be easy to flip over it versus having something that's like
so you could even add a physical card that just basically is like, hey, go check the notes.
Yeah, or a field. I mean, we always read the notes, but it'd be easy potentially to like breeze over a section that was like a critical, like, pay attention to this versus having a whole separate field. One thing I don't love about Airtable is the inability to color. You can't use, I think, I should double check this before I say this publicly, but I'm fairly positive that in their like general text fields, you can't color any of the text. Which would be so helpful. For so many things, if that's not true and I'm just a moron, I'd love to know. I feel like across the shop that could be nice to just not have to interrupt what you're doing, write ideas and stick them to the process, and then it's only when you're rebuilding that process that they sort of are relevant anyway. And so you wouldn't. And then, actually, that sort of fits nicely into the issue of, like, if the whole time you're sort of like, what's it called? Eliyahu Goldratt
theory of constraints.
Yeah.
If you're sort of figuring out what your constraint is and you're actually improving the constraint, none of the other ideas for like how to change whatever process are really relevant. So if you walk over to your constraint, assuming your constraint is physical, then it would kind of make sense to only be surfaced the information on that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting.
We'll see how it works.
Yeah. It could also be very overwhelming, potentially.
That said, I've enjoyed keeping a list in my pocket because I don't need to like, oh, we're running out of this supply and we need to both Kanban it now that like we've been running into this now that we're like stuff is production, not just prototyping. It's like I haven't Kanban it all. But just knowing that I won't forget it later takes a lot of pressure off.
Like just on your phone, you mean?
Yeah, I have a piece of paper in my pocket, but yeah.
Oh, nice.
Same idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, so similarly, it might be a relief to not feel like, oh, I need to go talk to this person about this idea, interrupt myself, interrupt them.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure we discuss it.
Right.
I don't know.
But also not have it get lost.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
We'll see.
Meanwhile, I just need to put heat in my shop.
Oh, God. Yeah.
It's been that's like my main stress right now is just like there's so many things to do. A lot of it needs money. I mean, we've had this discussion before, like some of it you can probably get around money, but like a bunch of it just needs money.
Yeah.
And we're like still a little cash strapped from downtime from the move.
Yeah.
Plus expenses from the move. And really the most critical thing is getting heat in the shop.
Oh, God.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Not going to be able to buy any of this other stuff until we get a heat pump.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and then it's like, well, I could get it for slightly cheaper. I could make the propane heater work.
Yeah.
But if we're going to be here for a while,
right.
Like we're not saving that much each right now. And it's going to cost so much more in the long run. It's just like, oh man. It's like, do I have to do the responsible thing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, if it was easy, everyone would do it. So
it's true. Yeah.
Here we are struggling along. 2 years in?
What?
Oh, to
lean.
like lean.
I was like, I think it's been a little longer than that.
Nah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And like coming back around, like I'm less stressed now. Like lean is fundamentally, having started down this path, is much better than where I was before.
Certainly.
Like heads and shoulders above.
Yes. We've increased our production. I should remeasure it. Last I measured it was 500%. We're way over that at this point.
Yeah.
We're like 1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge.
It is
and
huge.
It's the only reason I'm having all these problems.
Right.
is because, which are much better problems.
Got 99 problems, but lack of production isn't one.
No, lack of production is still a problem, but now we're moving a lot more product, so it's a win.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well,
it's good to note.
It's important to note.
Yeah. There's a little, maybe we'll wrap up with this little story. I think it was in Designing the Future. I think I've mentioned this on this, but I reread it and I was like, this is a great little anecdote. It's not really an anecdote, but there are 3 stone cutters working on a cathedral, and when asked, what are you doing? The first stone cutter says, the working conditions, like I'm in the sun all day. It's really hard. Like I really don't like work, but I have to make money, and these are the skills I have. And when the second stone cutter is asked, he says, the conditions are hard, but I do what I can. I keep my tools sharp. I try to, build my skills and then get better every day. And when the third stone cutter is asked, he says, I'm building a cathedral. So I feel like it's good to, I don't know, step back and remember like where are we headed, and like keep your like some view of the project and the exciting aspect of that.
Yeah.
And not just get buried in the slog.
Yeah.
So a little more time thinking about what the cathedral is.
Yeah.
What is your cathedral? And on that note,
we'll call it a wrap. Thank you everyone for listening. You can find the podcast on Instagram at incremental CI. You can find me on Instagram at lichen_MFG, on the web at lichenprecision.com.
And you can find me on the web at austeremanufacturing.com or on Instagram at austere_manufacturing. Also, we have a Patreon. If you enjoy the show and get value out of it, consider checking that out. And if you could leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it.
And continue to write in with feedback. We love it.
That's actually the best part.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.